All right, here we go. There's no way to avoid it at this point. We're just going to have to jump in. We're going to have to dive in. This is the Florida Atlantic Voice presented by Robes Law Group, ROBES, robeslawgroup.com, presenting partners of the Florida Atlantic Voice. I don't know what exactly this is going to be. This could go a myriad of directions. Either way, the reason we do the day after edition of the Florida Atlantic Voice, well, we always do it for you, but the reason we do this live component of the Florida Atlantic Voice podcast the day after, which, by the way, is the most listened to and watched component of the Florida Atlantic Voice, presented by Ropes Law Group. So we appreciate that. But we do this to allow you to get things off your chest, to ask questions, to give us your observations, to make sure you're just not talking to a wall or talking to your dog. We're here for you because we've watched every snap. I've called every snap. Robbie has documented every snap. And I'll acknowledge this. And by the way, Robbie Lastella, New Era Preps, the best damn football reporter in all of South Florida. Robbie, thank you for coming in. And I know that this is going to be a little bit like a bomb shelter here. We understand what we're walking into today. And we fully acknowledge that yesterday sucked, right? Like that's, I can't put it any more eloquently than that. Flat out, you lose at home, regular season finale on senior day after a crushing, you should have won, you deserve to win, crushing loss last weekend against UConn. And to put it quite simply, FAU just didn't show up. And I don't want to say lack of effort, because guys were trying, and we'll talk about an emotional moment on the sideline with Assad Wasim, because guys care, but didn't show up from an execution standpoint. It was listless from that perspective. And Robbie, that was about as bad as it gets yesterday.
Yeah. I did. That first half was as brutal as I've seen in my 6 years here. Get
this, Robbie. So, I don't mean to jump in, but just contextually, that is the first time that FAU was giving up 42 points and a half, and it happened in a first half finale 2016 at Middle Tennessee State when MTSU beat Florida Atlantic 77-58 with wide receiver Richie James playing quarterback starting midway through the first quarter, and then he ended up running for 241 yards. So there you go. There's context to what happened yesterday.
If we scored 58 points and lost 77-58, I think people would be feeling a lot better right now.
Yeah, that was the end of the Charlie Partridge era, though. He got fired minutes after that.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, that was not the way you want to go out at any stretch. And, people can argue, oh, this is the new era of college football, this, that, and the third, the other. I don't really want to hear that, right? You can argue that from a sense of the transfer portal. You can argue that from any other stretch. But at the end of the day, they are still putting on the pads. The players who went out there put on the pads. So they're not just going out there and playing at 50% speed. That is not how it goes. So that's just, it was a disappointing outcome yesterday, especially for the seniors. They definitely were trying. It's not like they were out there mailing it in. But it just didn't go their way. And that's unfortunate. That's the story of the season. A lot didn't go their way this year. And, in year one, that's going to happen. It happened at a rate where it wasn't achievable to get 6 wins, which is, again, unfortunate and leaves some to be desired. I think going out in that fashion, I think it does probably leave a bad taste in Kitley's mouth and probably makes him want to evaluate everything, right? See what led to this. He's an offensive guy. We talk about this all the time. Going out last game of your first season with 3 points, that's a dud. So gotta figure out some things in the offseason. We'll get into it. Some good news in the post-game press conference. Some interesting comments from Easton Messer and more. So we'll get into all that here, I'm sure, though.
The 3 points at home, it is the first time that Florida Atlantic was held without a touchdown on their home turf since homecoming 2016 when Western Kentucky came in and throttled FAU 52-3. As you can see, that 2016 season was wildly flawed for Florida Atlantic. There is a reason that Lane Kiffin came in the year after. Lane's not making any news these days. What's he up to right now? Again, there's a lot to unpack, and I feel like this is a good time to give a disclaimer that in moments like this, I need to send out into the owl sphere here. Anything that is said out of my mouth as the play-by-play voice of Florida Atlantic on this podcast, this is by rule. I would absolutely tell Zach Kittley to his face and or have covered it already with Zach Kittley, okay? Nothing said on here is meant to be hidden away. So don't think that, again, I work in close quarters with Zach Kittley. Anything I say here, which can be critical at times, I would or have already talked with Zach Kittley about, either in a personal setting, a FAU Sports Network setting, coaches show setting, all of that. Because I get a sense that I'm going to get you're just a shill, you're just a homer, and I do not operate like that in this capacity. And anybody who's followed me for 18 years, listening to me call games, know that I'm not being sunshiny if it is not appropriate to be so. So yesterday, I hope this doesn't happen, but it's natural that this is going to happen. It felt like yesterday may have some fans that feel as if equity has been lost after what we've seen in what a largely competitive month for FAU. I understand it. I don't think that should be the case, because you have a team that it looked like they were a little bit hungover from what happened to them last weekend. You're playing in front of a smattering of people on a Thanksgiving week at noon. And I know that it sounds like I'm excuse making, but I just hope that you have the capacity to look at scaring Navy, scaring Tulane, should have beat UConn. You were a kicked field goal away from possibly yesterday into being a critical matchup for bowl eligibility. I just hope that's not lost in the sleepwalk that we saw yesterday. I'm sure for some, Robbie, that'll be the case. And I understand the fan nature of this, but you got to look a little bit at the big picture here.
Yeah, you go through the season and you definitely see some highs. You see the potential, and that's what you have to look at in a year one. Obviously, this would have been the year where, limping to a 6-6 finish where things weren't pretty, that would have been better than average. That would have been ideal. That would have been achieving like more than expected. Unfortunately, they weren't able to get there. But there was, like you mentioned, a couple different games here where they had a chance to really upset somebody that one of the top teams in the conference. And so going into year two, that's going to be the big thing, is can they knock off one of the top teams? Because they kept it close with out of conference UConn, and then in conference at times they kept it close with USF. At times they kept it close with Navy and Tulane as well. And even Memphis, that game was close going into the fourth quarter. So all those games had moments where FAU was competitive. And in year two, they have to find a way to, you're not going to win them all. If they do, then, credit to them, but got to find a way to at least convert, a couple of these top games against the top teams into a victory. That's going to be the big thing in year two, obviously getting to a bowl game as well. But it's got to be a little pretty. It can't be, obviously you get the wins, but it's got to look like this team found, the key to upsetting some of these top teams in the conference. Because right now you can't say FAU is bottom because they beat some of the lower tier teams in the conference, but you definitely can't say they're top. So you'd say they're right in the middle right now, in my opinion. And the moves that they make in this offseason, who they retain, who comes in, that's going to be the big thing next year, and to into what they can do to kind of turn some of those close games into wins.
Yeah, I think FAU probably is middle to below middle in the American. I think that it reflects that in the standings, and I think it reflects it on the field in terms of production and in terms of result. It's all there. By the way, Christian, in the chat. The chat is open, by the way, for everybody who's watching live on X and on YouTube. Go ahead and jump in the chat. It is open for you, for your thoughts. We'll answer your questions. We'll take your observations. We'll let you rant if you want to. It's fine. We will cover it all. We understand that this is an open dialogue. Don't be scared. Just because I am the play-by-play voice of the school, employed by the school, we cover everything. And again, we don't say anything that wouldn't be addressed face-to-face with Zach Kitley himself. Okay, that is my Ken LaVicka guarantee to you. Robbie Lastella, New Era Preps, covering every single snap of FAU football. Christian says, morning, fellas. Nephew, good morning. It is good to be graced with your presence. By the way, Inter Miami scored more than FAU did last night. I am the play-by-play voice of Inter Miami as well, and they are now Eastern Conference champions after beating NYCFC last night 5-1. Today, Oyende a hat trick. They'll play for the MLS Cup Championship next weekend against Vancouver. So that's right. I went right from FAU to Fort Lauderdale, called that, and then we have FAU basketball if you're watching live, 3:30 today. So, Robbie, this we're loading up on tea. I've got the tea, I've got the honey, I've got the lemon. Let's go. It's that time of year. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now, this isn't tea. This is actually just coffee right now. But I don't even know if Duncan's a partner right now of Florida Atlantic. So if they are, forget you ever saw that. Or if they're not, forget you ever saw that. All right. So where do you want to go here first? There's so many different avenues to take. For you, Robbie, there's just name something that stood out to you yesterday, or even just from a big now season conclusion picture. We'll cover that. You guide me, and then I'll sort of lead us in that direction. Where do you want to go here?
Yeah, well, I think looking at the game, I mean, obviously we're not going to dive into a 45-3 game where there were 0 points scored in the second half. But I do think the one interesting thing from that game, which Kitley talked about in the post game, was Caden Veltkamp getting pulled when he was probably 100 or so yards shy of the single season passing yards record. He probably would have broke that, in my opinion. If they kept him in, they kept the offense going at full gear, probably would have scored more than 3 points. No dig at Zach Gibson. We've seen him lead the offense multiple times this year to a touchdown, but didn't happen in that game. But anyway, the reason in that Caden was benched, according to Zach Kitley, who didn't like the word bench. He preferred a different term that he didn't use. He didn't give us the different term. He just said he wouldn't use bench. But anyway, he mentioned that Caden most likely will be getting shoulder surgery here in a couple of weeks. And Kitley didn't want to risk any further injury, whether that was to the shoulder or any other potential injury here. That game was more than over. The offense was stuck in the mud, and although, it would have been nice to pad the stats, put them in the record books. I think everyone knows what the offense did this season. They don't, unfortunately, he won't get that number 1 title, but, more than likely we'll have a shot to do it next year because also, as Kitley mentioned, he will be back. Mentioned it on your post game, mentioned it on our post in the press conference. So, Ken, what do you think about that? I mean, taking Caden out of the game there, 100 yards shy, although he might be getting shoulder surgery. I mean, it didn't look like the offense. I mean, it didn't look. Well, I mean, there were a couple throws there where I was like, "Whoa, what's going on?" So maybe it was.
There was, especially in the first quarter, there was a throw that he's made all season. From between the hashes to the outside right sideline. I believe the intended receiver was it was either Wasim or Platt. I can't remember. I think it was Wasim. And it was just so off the mark. It was well behind him. It ended up sailing 7 yards out of bounds into the East Carolina bench. And that was the first time in a while, knowing that Veltkamp's had that shoulder issue and I told Chris Newbold this as it happened on the broadcast on the air, that didn't look like Caden Veltkamp. I I did not. Full transparency, I was not fully cognizant at the time that Veltkamp was only 100 yards short of the single season passing mark. I did not know at the time. It was brought to my attention shortly thereafter. But we also speculated, Chris Newbold and myself, that as things continue to get lopsided in the first half, knowing about the shoulder injury for Veltkamp, what was the point in keeping him on the field? Another full transparency. I have known for weeks that Caden Veltkamp has been locked up by FAU going into 2026. So nothing that was said or revealed yesterday was new to me at all. I know. And obviously I'm not going to put it out there when I find out, because that does me no good in my relationship with Zach Kitley. I'm not a journalist. I call the games for the school. But knowing that context during the game, why would you keep a quarterback in who's already going to need to have a procedure? And I also knew that was going to need to take place at some point this offseason. Why make it worse? Because, yes, Veltkamp has played with this injury, but to my knowledge, this is not an injury where, you know how doctors say, oh, might as well play with it if you can function. It's not going to get any worse. No, I think this injury could absolutely get worse. And you're already facing the prospect of not having Caden Veltkamp in the spring. The last thing you want is him to have multiple procedures. He'll go under the knife. He'll be taken care of, and then we'll see him come fall camp, and he has a full summer to get his arm strength back. But there was no, forget chasing the record books. It's in my mind, forget chasing the record books. Who cares? I can't tell you how few times we actually go back to that. And especially with him coming back next year, there was no point in keeping him in the game at all. Let's talk about Caden Veltkamp just from a big picture standpoint. So he's coming back next year. That is a good thing. That is an exceptional thing. You have a guy who's going to finish top 3 passing yardage in all of college football coming back to Florida Atlantic next year. That's exceptional. But Robbie, I look at my Twitter replies, and it's a very toxic place sometimes. I would not recommend people get into that, okay? And you would think for some people this is a bad thing that Caden Veltkamp is returning to Florida Atlantic. And I don't know what's happening here. And I do want to give you, though, a little bit of context into what I'm talking about. So I quoted Zach Kitley on the post-game show. Zach Kitley on the FAU Sports Network. Quarterback Caden Veltkamp returning for 2026. Quote, done deal. By the way, Jake in the chat, what game did Caden hurt his shoulder? It was the Memphis game, if I recall correctly. Is that right, Robbie, in the Memphis game?
Yeah, I don't remember. I think he either took a bad hit blindside or fell on it.
Yes, he got hit from behind. That's exactly what it was.
Yeah. I remember that. And I do remember people thought he was going to be out after that, like in that moment, and then he just came back. Shout out Adrenaline. Shout out his best friend Toradol. Shout out those two things.
Yeah, and let it be known that Robbie isn't just bringing up the Toradol. That came out of Caden Veltkamp's mouth.
Yeah, I'm not doing that. But but yeah, no, he definitely he was every part of a leader. And obviously there was some interception issues, and maybe that was compounded by the shoulder issue. Maybe that was some mistakes. Whatever you want to chalk it up to. It wasn't perfect. Definitely wasn't perfect. But when you think about the volume he's throwing at with 0-1 game at times, and a couple of those games, by the end of the season, I think Jamari came out. This game, I think Jamari was probably the healthiest he's been since the early season. Credit to him for, I thought Jamari would have been my MVP. Half the dump offs were going to him there at the end of that game. So if I have to pick one MVP from that game, it's going to be Jamari Sands. I believe he really kind of played the best in terms of overall, like from what he was injured, and then all of a sudden he came back and was a contributor. So, in terms of Caden though, Definitely some unfortunate moments, but to have him back, retention is everything now in college athletics. Doesn't matter who it is. Like if you look at basketball, for example, Devin Vanterpool was not FAU's best player last year by any stretch, but he took a major jump here in year 2. Caden was arguably FAU's best player this year, football wise, quarterback. To have your quarterback come back is huge. And whether there were some struggles or not this year, okay, but they can iron that out and not have to teach a quarterback the entirety of the new offense.
So I tweeted, Zach Kitley on FAU Sports Network, quarterback Caden Veltkamp returning for 2026, quote, done deal. That was the quote. That was the rare piece of journalism that I'm ever going to do on the Florida Atlantic Sports Network. Done deal, because it was pertinent and it was an exact quote, and we move on. I get a reply almost immediately. I mean, what options does Veltkamp have? Seriously. He's the nation's number 1 passer. And so I get the reply to that. Well, then he won't be in Boca next year. Stop with your awful takes because you're employed by who you are and you have to say that. He has the most interceptions thrown in all of FBS. That's who you're saying is the number 1 passer? What are we basing that on? No non-FAU fan would have such a take. Come on. Yes, the interceptions. There were a lot of interceptions thrown. Let's get into that in just a moment. But it is indisputable that going into yesterday, Caden Veltkamp was from a passing yards per game standpoint, and he has been flirting up and down, seesawing 1 to 3, 1 to 3, 1 to 3 for the last month, being the number 1 passer in college football. Number 1 passer means passing yards, and he has been at the top of that all year long in college football. What really drove me crazy, though, about that is not the semantics about number 1 passer, okay? Because I never said number 1 rated quarterback, all right? But he's the number 1 passer. He's put up numbers that we've only seen one other time in the history of FAU football. He put up numbers that are better than, 133 other quarterbacks in college football this year. But the insinuation that Caden Veltkamp doesn't have any other options than Florida Atlantic, that's idiocy. Flat out dumbassery, if I can be so verbose. What a stupid thought that is, that Caden Veltkamp hasn't had schools in his DMs all year long, hasn't had Power 4 teams groveling to him on their collective knees, begging him to take a bag, pleading with him to have his agent get into negotiations. There's a reason why weeks ago, Zach Kitley had Caden Veltkamp locked in and pen to paper and making sure that he was solidified as FAU's quarterback in 2026. Because I'm sure starting in week 3, you had Power 4 programs, not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but dare I say, Robbie, I bet there were at least a dozen power programs who are reaching out to Caden Veltkamp for his services. And we're not talking slight amounts of money. We're probably talking 6 figures for every single one. And I bet some were even flirting with a 7-figure number for a guy who is big, who is broad, who has a big right arm, who is also very accurate. I know the interceptions have happened, but he was throwing at a 67% clip going into yesterday, which was tops in the nation. You think that the only option for Florida for Caden Veltkamp was FAU, that he was left with no other option? That's insane. I mean, that's just you not understanding college football, not appreciating what you're seeing from Caden Veltkamp. FAU getting Caden Veltkamp locked in for 2026 is a major upset. It is a coup of epic college football proportions. It is a phenomenal, overwhelmingly shocking job by Zach Kitley of playing CEO for FAU football. So I refuse to sit here and be told by Twitter fingers that Caden Veltkamp is settling for FAU, when in reality, FAU worked its ass off, and Zach Kittley worked its ass off to develop a trust with Caden Veltkamp where he feels comfortable coming back next year and not going to the freaking SEC, because he had multiple chances to do that. I'm sorry, but that is really, really idiotic.
I mean, all you really have to look at, and, people, no one from last year's team, Cam Fancher was a starting quarterback in the Big 12 this season. I think that's all you really need to look at. If their quarterbacks, if they have starting experience, that's all they really need. And then if they have success, that's easy poach territory right there.
Yeah. That's a good point. You're not only retaining a starting quarterback for the first time since N'Kosi Perry. There have only been like 3 seasons in the last 15 years where there hasn't been a quarterback competition at FAU. It was year 2, Chris Robinson. It was year 2, N'Kosi Perry. And that's been it for the last 10 to 15 years. You have to go all the way back to Quez Johnson to get to where there wasn't a quarterback competition going into camp with Charlie Partridge. But any retention is good for a starting quarterback, a starter period, but you retain. And I think that Jake gave me the exact number after yesterday. Number 3 in all of college football in passing yards. You retain that at Florida Atlantic. How are you not jumping for joy today? How did you not have a celebratory drink over that last night once you heard the news? I'm sorry. It's just such jaded crap with some fans sometimes.
Yeah, well, I mean, unfortunately, I do see where they're coming from a fan's perspective, in the sense that not necessarily with, digging at Caden, but in terms of being, doom and gloom after yesterday's game. It was probably Caden's worst performance of the season. A lot of people like to live in the moment. What are you doing for me right now? Type of deal. And that's understandable. Obviously this year's results as a whole wasn't good enough. But would you rather go back to the drawing board with, who knows what you can get in the transfer portal that will require NIL money? I'm sure Caden is taking a discount compared to what you would have to pay a quarterback of his same caliber in the transfer portal. You want to say he wasn't great? Sure. Go try to find one in the transfer portal with the ability to do what he can do and have the ability to have if they had to go replace Caden Veltkamp, I would not comfortably sit here and say that 6 wins should be the mandatory next year. With him on the roster, with him coming back, absolutely 110% make your bowl game trips. If not, that's an issue, but that's neither here or there. Having him back is step number 1 to getting there, and it's very important that they did that. It's a sign that Kittley is very forward thinking here. We'll get into his comments on NIL a bit later, I'm sure. Credit to him for answering the question right after a game. But I think he's thinking well in terms of how to build this roster, and we'll see how the offseason goes.
I am not going to say this, and I don't want people to translate this as or consume this as me disrespecting the person Cam Fancher, okay? Outstanding human being, great family.
Great.
Appreciate that he came in to try to solidify the offense last season at Florida Atlantic. But I want everybody to really think about this extremely diligently, extremely hard right now, just in the moment. Would you have rather had year 2 of Cam Fancher at Florida Atlantic for 6-figure money in NIL like he was paid? Tom Herman wasn't shy about it. He was the highest paid player on the FAU roster in 2024. Would you rather have Cam Fancher this year over Caden Veltkamp? Would you rather have Cam Fancher coming back for a final year at Florida Atlantic or year 2 of Caden Veltkamp? And I know what I am picking every single second of every single minute of every single hour of every single day from here on out. And it's Veltkamp, Veltkamp, Veltkamp. So, yes, he threw a lot of interceptions. FAU as a team threw a lot of interceptions. Florida Atlantic turned the ball over often. But Caden Veltkamp is the best pure quarterback FAU has had since Chris Robinson. And it's not debatable. N'Kosi Perry was fine, but he was limited. Caden Veltkamp runs this offense as well as anybody in the country can. And this passing offense is going to go down as a top 5 in the country. FAU's never done that before. And Caden Veltkamp is a huge reason why. So, again, you can have all of your criticisms of the interceptions and the mistakes, and that is totally fair. And I'm not telling you not to do that. But what I am saying is for you to sit here and think that Caden Veltkamp's only option was to come back to FAU, and that's why it is happening, is completely undercutting the effort and the pure college football upset in 2025 it is that Caden Veltkamp is coming back for a year too. It is a remarkable, miraculous job from Zach Kidley to fight off SEC and ACC and Big 12 teams and Big 10 teams for the services of Caden Veltkamp. I promise you, he could have taken his 6-figure pick of teams from all of those conferences and opted to come back to Florida Atlantic. Okay? Like that is not me exaggerating. That is me giving you straight, cold truth right now.
100%. And then going back to that, yeah, I mean, if you can show, even if it's not pretty, if you can show you can lead an offense at the American Conference level in any scenario, even if it's for one game, heck, even if it's for one drive, that is film that at the arguably the best conference outside of the power ranks, that you can do it. And power teams would rather take a shot on a guy who is one drive of experience at the American Conference level than a high schooler right now. That's just where we're at. And with the transfer portal, it is amazing. And I'm interested to see who else he can kind of manage to do that with here going forward. But yes, I agree.
So as far as the interceptions are concerned, and certainly Caden Veltkamp had his fair share of mistakes that led to a number of these interceptions, okay? But we've talked, this is not our first rodeo talking about why these have happened at the rate that they have taken place. And a large portion of it is the fact that FAU has not had a run game to draw the attention of the defense. And so FAU has also been playing from behind a lot this season. So you're in spots where you have to throw and keep throwing. And while you keep throwing, you don't have anything that the defense has to worry about on the ground. So what are you able to do? Hey, linebackers, go out in coverage. Hey, safeties, go back and cheat in your too high coverage. Go ahead and hunt the football. And FAU, despite that, was still able to churn out prodigious yardage in the pass game. But Florida Atlantic is going to end the year with its second lowest rushing total in the last 15 years as a program. 104.5 yards per game on the ground, Florida Atlantic this season. Look at North Texas. Very similar offense with Eric Morris, soon to be Oklahoma State head coach. They're going to the American Conference Championship game. FAU finishes as a better passing offense than North Texas. North Texas averaged over 186 yards on the ground this year. From a team standpoint, that is 84 more yards per game on the ground North Texas put up as opposed to Florida Atlantic. That, to me, on the offensive side of the ball, and we can get to the turnovers, but I think it's all predicated on this. That is the most damning number that had the biggest impact on Florida Atlantic as a team this season, the complete lack of a running game, because it made FAU's offense, while prolific, completely one-dimensional. And that ultimately is where teams were able to gain the advantage on FAU.
Yeah, I think we've talked about the lack of run game throughout the season, and I think it goes back to they just didn't add enough in that room in the offseason, and I think that's a room that's already being addressed right now. We see Leonard Farrow from Fairmont State as a D2 coming. He was a solid running back there. He's already committed and signed, posted by the athletic department. So no decommit coming like we just saw from a wide receiver recently. So that's a big pickup right off the bat. He had a big year at the D2 level. That's them definitely making a concerted effort to address this room because last year we only brought in Ethan Irvin, a true freshman, and they needed more than that. Obviously, no Jamari, Caden Shields Dutton, and Xavier Terrell are all talented, but Xavier Terrell was out for the year by I think it was the Memphis game. I think that was the last game he played. And then Jamari Sands was hurt, and that just left KSD and a true freshman and then a walk-on. I think Joshua Harriet played yesterday.
Because Ethan Irvin was out. So Joshua Harriet saw time yesterday. So you were, by the end of the season, you were on your fifth string and really last running back in that room that was seeing action.
Yeah, Christian Prosher was next up on the depth chart. So I don't think that can't
Academy.
That can't happen. So I think we're going to see a running back room where they bring in at least 2 guys this offseason, maybe 3, to make sure they have the proper depth and talent in that room to really give Kitley the compliment he needs. I was on East Carolina radio early this week, and they were asking, it seems like the offense has had its explosiveness, but what has led to the mistakes and the poor record? And obviously I saw the comment about the defense, and I'm sure we'll get to that. I don't think Brett Dewhurst will be fired. I don't know that for sure. Could happen, but I think there was a lot of issues in a lot of places, and it's tough to pinpoint. Yes, the defense was ugly, brutal at times, but there was no run game at times. The pass game struggled at times. So I don't know if the defense firing the coordinator is the best way to go about it. We'll get into that in a little bit. But in terms of the run game, I think that is something that if they address, get enough depth and talent in there to keep the offense flowing, I think that we'll see the offense improve drastically next season. Look at what Kitley did with Taj Brooks. That's all you need.
Right, and so that's important. And I'm a firm believer this is just my football philosophy, and my football philosophy means nothing. I'm just a dope who calls the games. But a running game does not exist without an offensive line that can open up the holes to allow that running game to exist. And this offensive line was just not good enough really at any point of the season to allow success for Jamari Sands or allow success for Caden Shields Dutton. It was not good enough. It needs to be improved. And offensive line is the most difficult position group to fortify and to make productive in 2025 college football, because so many of these guys are floating around, and it is very difficult in one offseason to put together an offensive line that can gel together, that can understand the sets, that can figure out how to execute in all those different scenarios. That's the one that's hurt most from a lack of continuity. You can get an all-world quarterback that comes in and he can run half the playbook, make it happen. Same thing with a receiver, same thing on the defensive side of the ball, running stunts up front or in your secondary. But if the offensive line turns over 3, 4, 5 guys every offseason, it is so difficult to be consistent, because it means you're really having to go 11th hour cram in pass protection, trying to protect the guy who's going to be the highest paid player on your team at that quarterback spot, or trying to establish a run game to help that highest paid player and the blocking schemes up front. So it is very, very difficult. So, yeah, we can talk about the depth or the lack thereof in the FAU running back room, but the offensive line flat out was not good enough this year, and that's been acknowledged by the FAU coaching staff. I'm glad you mentioned Taj Brooks, because another thing I got yesterday was, and this is turning into a therapy session for me, so I appreciate that. And Jake, by the way, in the chat, minute we improve our running game and O-line, we're winning. I completely agree with that. Completely agree with that. At least you're in every single game from here on out. But in 2023, a myriad of injuries in that Texas Tech quarterback room, including Tyler Shuck now with the New Orleans Saints. And I got this yesterday. Oh, Zach Kitley doesn't know how to coach a running game, doesn't know how to put a running game on the field. That's why we're throwing so much. That's why defense has figured us out, and it's why turnover doesn't know what he's doing because he doesn't. It's an air raid offense. He doesn't know how to put a running game on the field. No. All you have to do is use Google. Google, Google.com. And chances are on your smartphone, if you just open your browser, whether you have an iPhone or an Android, you don't even have to type Google.com. You can just, in the search bar, type in what you want to search for because that's Google. And I want you to simply put in Zach Kittley run game, Texas Tech, okay? Or even Zach Kittley run game. And the first thing that comes up, you don't even have to scroll. You don't even have to press page 2 or page 3. You'll see Taj Brooks, who ran for damn near 1,600 yards in 2023 at Texas Tech. Last time I checked, Taj Brooks was a running back. That's Zach Kittley. That's his offense. He called the plays. He drew it up. He ran it. So I don't want to hear that Zach Kittley doesn't know how to field a run game when he had arguably the best running back in all of college football in 2023. He can, but also the run game was affected by an offensive line that Zach Kittley acknowledged going into the season. He felt it was very much going to be a work in progress, and a running back room that suffered from injury and from lack of bodies and having to depend on guys you didn't necessarily think would have to go heavy load at the point of the season that they went. But don't tell me that Zach Kittley with this air raid offense doesn't know how to run the ball. Because one, he's talked about it, and two, all you have to do is Google it. It's just completely factually incorrect.
Yeah, Christian had him on the New Era Prep, had Taj Brooks on the New Era Prep podcast shortly after Kittley was hired. And if you go and Google that, you can hear Taj Brooks' opinion on Zach Kittley and how much he helped him personally. You hear a lot about Zach Kittley, how he helped Patrick Mahomes when he was at GA. Well, he did similar things for Taj Brooks as a running back. And the offense as well. So there's a good relationship there. And it's not just quarterbacks that Kittley likes to coach in the offense. He likes to coach the offense as a whole. He'll coach the left guard and coach him up in that sense. So the run game will unlock new keys to the offense as a whole. And I'm interested to see how they address the depth of the room as well as the offensive line, as you mentioned, losing some key pieces there on that right side of the line. Looks like I believe Fia Cable has more eligibility. We'll see if they can retain. And
yeah, I believe he does.
We'll see if they can retain him, and that's a piece to kind of build around from there. Got some young guys in that room that maybe could give you a boost. Braden Cunningham is a name to watch next year for sure. Pushed for a starting job this offseason, but didn't win it. But I think that's a guy next year who will, again, be competing for a starting job and could win. So, but outside of those two guys next year, got to bring in some other pieces for sure.
While we're on the subject of the offense, one thing that I don't think has necessarily gotten enough attention, and I have not done a good enough job of asking Zach Kittley in my time with him during the course of the year why this has happened, but the lack of red zone success has been such a mystery to me. During the offseason, you may remember here on the Florida Atlantic Voice, Robbie, I basically boiled down FAU's failure last year to the fact that the red zone offense was non-existent. It was a huge detriment to that football team. And Zach Kittley, with his history of success in the red zone, especially last year at Texas Tech, where the Red Raiders were top 20 in the country in red zone conversions, they clocked in converting 90.3% of the time, including a near 65% touchdown rate in the red zone. That's prolific. That wins you a lot of football games. In 2025, so again, keep in mind, 90% red zone, north of it for Texas Tech last year. 65% touchdown percentage. This year, FAU 72.5% in the red zone and sub 50% touchdown rate. I have not done a good enough job of focusing on that and mentioning it enough. But also, this is on me. This is a bad job by me, flat out terrible job by me. I have not posed to Zach Kittley enough why this has happened, why he thinks that has taken place. To go from top 20 in the nation at Texas Tech last year to 126 of 133 in college football this season, that's just as bad as FAU's red zone was last year. That should be, in my world, if I spent so much time on it in the offseason saying that was FAU's fatal flaw a year ago, I need to come out and say that this was one of FAU's fatal flaws in 2025. So I apologize to everybody for not discussing it enough, for not putting it on the table enough. And with my access, my plentiful access to Zach Kittley, me not posing that to him enough. I mean, Robbie, that's bad. That is not win a lot of games, red zone production or lack thereof.
Yeah, anytime it was really kind of asked, it was kind of, they gotta put it in the end zone. That was the simple thing. I think we saw them. I think he was, a little more aggressive than he was in Texas Tech in terms of going for it. But I think they were cashing in at Texas Tech before it got to, fourth down, and that decision had to be made. So I do think, obviously no run game that hurt, but also
True,
I feel
that definitely hurts.
But I also feel like the tight end room completely went ghost after the Rice game. And I don't, obviously the wide receivers do what they do, but we've talked about it on here. The strength of the wide receivers is what they do, yards after catch. There's no yards after catch room really in the red zone unless you're, the 19 and 20, and then you can do a little screen and go do it that way. But you need a tight end. You need running backs to really cash in the red zone a lot of times. Got to get creative. And we've seen them do that at times, try to get creative with different formations, trick plays, whatnot. But this offseason, I think addressing a really good tight end in that room, because Kirch graduates. He had senior day yesterday. I don't know if he'll be petitioning for any more eligibility afterwards because he did come from the D2 level. So who knows? We'll visit that bridge when we get there. But I do think they should bring in a new piece in that room to try to give them something in the red zone next year at tight end and more consistently. I mean, this isn't going to be an offense where, the tight end is putting up 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns, but it just at times was a completely non-factor. And I feel like it would give the offense an added boost.
Michael Kirch, by the way, in the final month of the season, he had the 4 catches against Rice, obviously. 4 catches, 2 touchdowns, far and away his best game of the year. Had 4 catches and a touchdown against USF. He had 2 catches the rest of the season after the USF game. The final month of the year, Michael Kirch, 2 catches for 18 total yards. And again, I don't know if that's Kirch. I don't know if that is play calling. I don't know if that's just it wasn't the time for him in any of those games to really be able to fit the framework of the offense. But Florida Atlantic's tight ends within this offense just went away. It didn't have much impact. You started to see it coming on with Kirch, and then it just disappeared after that. And I also don't know the reason for that. Brooklyn Jet. Do we see any wholesale changes, specifically defensive coordinator, because the defense has been pretty terrible? We also need to evaluate the running back room. We've talked about the running backs. I believe teams average 35 points against us. That is right around that neighborhood. Yes, we need a DC change. I am not going to speculate on coaching staff changes. What I will say, Robbie, is that I would be really surprised. I would be surprised about any sort of substantial reshuffling of the coaching staff. I don't know how you feel about it, and I will never speculate on coaches exiting at Florida Atlantic. Just not my style. I don't like it. It's not good taste. It's not something appropriate for someone of my stature at FAU to do. But just from the broadest possible sense, I would be really, really, really shocked if that thing was shuffled around.
Well, I mean, I can say it because I'm not sitting here saying he should be fired. I don't think Brett Dewhurst should be fired here after year one. The defense was definitely struggled at times, which is an understandable concern and complaint from the fan base and anyone. However, when you make a defensive coordinator change, you have to understand everything that goes into that. You're not just firing him and then bringing in some new guy to just plug and play. That also, whatever Brett Dewhurst was running in terms of scheme, you got to go out and get whatever the new defensive coordinator wants. That means wholesale changes across the entire defense. And yes, while changes need to be made, and maybe, that's positionally figuring out new pieces to bring in on the defense to try to enhance what Brett Dewhurst is running. If you bring in a new coordinator, you're going back to the drawing board with the defense. There's a chance for them to build on what they did this year and get better. If you bring out a year one guy, it's just a lot. They're trying to build on what they did this year. Although it wasn't pretty, you can still build on it and get better. It's tough to do that right away with a first year guy. We saw what first year looks like this year. Second year is a lot better. It should be. And if it's not, then
we start having those conversations.
Start hitting that panic button a little bit, but you got to give him time to build his stuff. They were building his defense here from scratch. Pieces were coming in. Like Demarius McGee was a very late addition. He came in like a couple weeks before the season started, and he ended up being one of the best DBs. So they were really working. I saw them make adjustments throughout the season. It wasn't pretty by the end. I'm not going to sit here and say by the end of the season they had figured everything out and it's all sunshine and roses. I'm not going to sit here and say that. But there was some highlights at times. And at times the offense let them down.
It's not like Rock Bellantoni's defense was gangbusters last year, okay? No. With a lot of similar pieces. I mean, let's not forget, whether you agree with it or not, or thought it was a stunt or not, or a sacrifice to the altar of keeping your employment. But Rock Bellantoni lost his job after playing East Carolina last year, right? Now he was eventually brought back, and still that final 3 weeks of last year was as toxic as I remember at FAU. And I was there for the Carl Pelini drug ouster. But it's not like this defense was all world last year either. I don't know. Ultimately, and it's not like Brett Dewhurst. This is the thing about this coaching staff that I appreciate. They've been very open about the fact that they have not been sunshine and roses. Before the season, I mean, Brett Dewhurst acknowledged, I don't know if we have enough to sustain up front. We'll see about the secondary because there's a lot of new pieces. He didn't make promises to anybody. And some warts started to show, and you tried to fight them off, and unfortunately, it didn't work. And Brett Dewhurst acknowledged last week he took the loss to UConn on him. Said that we acknowledged that was not good enough. That was on us. I can respect that. Florida Atlantic, though, does allow 90 points in the final two games, with a 2-game stretch where they needed 2 wins to become bowl eligible. Back against the wall. The objective was pretty clear, and the defense allows 90. That's killer right there. That's the only other way, the only way to describe it. That's killer, and it's not good enough, and it is cause for, I'm sure, very intense evaluation of that entire side of the ball going into this offseason.
And I think that's what you have to do on both sides of the ball. You didn't reach 6 wins. That's the goal. At the end of the day, we can sit here and find victories in certain areas, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, they did not reach 6 wins. That's something Zach Kitley has said is more than attainable here. Got to find a way to do it. So, yes, they're going to evaluate both sides of the ball, defense especially, but firing the defensive coordinator would create havoc. You make a good hire and you're able to flip a switch. North Texas did that this year, but their previous defensive coordinator, they didn't fire right away. There's no guarantee they make a better hire. Who knows? Hiring is always Never, it could go one way or the other. So I think you gotta give the DC here, Brett Dewhurst, some time. You gotta give him one more year at least. And if things turn out ugly again next year, hopefully not. But then you can start having those conversations. You want to maybe bring in an analyst here. You want to bring in a new position coach. You want to evaluate that and see if there's, a veteran, because this was Brett Dewhurst's first year as defensive coordinator. I think, Rock Bellantoni was originally going to, I believe he was going to coach linebackers, I believe, or outside, whatever. He was going to have a role on the staff. I believe
he was hired as the linebacker coach, then went to Auburn.
So, yeah, you got to find a veteran maybe to bring in as an analyst or something. I feel like the defensive side of the ball is very young. I'm not digging at any of these position coaches. I think Devin Santana, Antonio Finellis, Coach Schwann's, all these guys are really good positional coaches, but got to bring in an analyst maybe here on the defensive side of the ball, give Brett Dewhurst, the veteran, to lean on. Maybe even the same on the offensive side of the ball. I'm not saying get Kitley an offensive coordinator. I said last week, I think they showed they don't need that. But analysts, that's what they're here for. They're here, these coaches, these veteran coaches who lose their jobs in other places or looking for bounce backs, they come in as analysts, you pick their brain, and you get better. So maybe that's the route they go next year. But I don't think anyone should be necessarily fired right now.
Yeah, I don't know what Zach Kitley's going to do. What I do know is he, week after week after week, evaluates not only the team but himself and the coaching staff. And I don't know if this brings solace to anybody, but I don't think that Zach Kitley's taking this laying down and it's going to be, let's hit the portal and we'll bring in these new players and then everything's going to be better defensively next year. I don't think that he's just going to toss that aside as some passing first year. Everything's going to be fine. He will put this team in the best position to fix some of its defensive woes. And those multiple messages in the chat. The chat is open, by the way. Florida Atlantic Voice, presented by Robes Law Group, ROBES, robeslawgroup.com. Day after edition. Season ending 42-3 loss to East Carolina. FAU gives up all 42 points in the second half. Get in the chat. The chat is open, whether you're watching on YouTube, whether you're watching on Twitter. Jump in. We're still going to be here for a little bit. Go a little extended because, again, there's a lot to cover here with this being the final game of the season, and no shortage of things that FAU is going to have to address in this offseason. But Florida Atlantic, 29 turnovers this year, the most in the country. That's also, obviously, as you would suspect, the most in program history. FAU had the worst turnover margin in all of college football at -21. That there, we talked about the lack of running game. I mean, the turnover margin, unable to gain turnovers. FAU only 7. Make that 8 this year. That puts them even, by the way, with Georgia Tech, which Georgia Tech's an 8-win team. Georgia Tech went toe-to-toe with Georgia back-to-back years. But for most teams, you're not going to win with that lack of takeaways, but turning it over 29 times, having a -21 turnover margin. I don't care if it's FAU. I don't care if it is Ole Miss. I don't care if it's Alabama. I don't care if it's Georgia. I don't care if it's Ohio State. There is not a single team in the country that's putting itself in a spot to have a trophy at the end of the year in any capacity with 29 turnovers and a -21 turnover margin. That might be the one aspect of this team that stands out most to me where I have no explanation for it. And I can't even put any sort of optimistic sort of bow on it. That's just flat out losing football. That's as bad as I've ever seen. And I would suspect it's as bad as Zach Kitley's ever seen.
Yeah. Before I get into that, there is breaking news. Ryan Silverfield is leaving Memphis to be the head coach at Arkansas. So that is very interesting.
So what about Golish? So did Memphis run misdirection with Golish to get Silverfield? Is that what just happened?
I don't know. Brett
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So
Yeah.
think about this, Robbie. Last year, the American had 6 coaches get fired. 6 programs decided that they needed a new coach. Their program was going in the wrong direction, FAU being one of them. This year, you're going to have Silverfield to Arkansas. Wow, that's wild. You're going to have Morris to Oklahoma State.
That one makes sense.
Summerall is in all likelihood going to Auburn. And when we were down there, that was the consensus amongst Tulane people, that Tulane was definitely going to watch Summerall go to Auburn. But now Golish, who we thought was going to Arkansas, I don't think, based on his comments yesterday, there's any way he's going back to USF. He did that whole like avoid, talk in circles type of thing. Summerall, where does this leave him now? Florida? Is Summerall going to Florida? Is Golish going to Florida? One of those two has to go to Florida, right? Is it going to be Summerall now?
What I'm thinking and how this works out, maybe.
Oh, hold on. Jake Golish is going to Auburn per Pete Thamel. Wow. So here's what I think has happened. Summerall has agreed in terms to Florida. Auburn, who had Summerall as their first option, saw that and decided we need to go get Golish now, or else we're on the outside looking in. Oh my God. Wow.
I just want to say here, there were real people on the internet, Ken. Real people, I assume.
Not robots, not trolls sitting in. Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, see, that's the thing on Twitter these days. I don't know for sure, but I believe they were real people. Real people who believed that the University of South Florida was a job to stay at over the Southeastern Conference. There were real people debating that on Twitter.
But these are the same people who say USF's going to the Big Ten. And to that I say big verbal fart. Sorry.
I don't like. There is no American Conference team, Memphis included, FedEx Money included, where you stay, especially after you have been there for multiple years with some form of success. Alex Golish did not take USF to where that athletic department wants to go, but still he found an SEC offer. You got to take it. You have to. And I'm sorry, USF fans. The investment is there, but there's nothing there that makes it better than an SEC job. There's nothing there that makes it better than a Big Ten job. There's nothing there. You can argue. You want to sit here and argue if it's better than Boston College? Go for it. But other than that, I don't see the reason why.
If there is a God, if there is a true football God, I don't want to delve into like the overwhelming religious aspects of this. If there is a football God, okay, and I like to think that like in football heaven, and he hasn't passed, but like Mike Ditka is football God, or at least the face of football God is Ditka's with the mustache and the glasses and that whole thing. If there is a football God, USF will make an absolutely horrendous mistake and fall to the star power of John Gruden. Dare I put out into the universe that USF should hire John Gruden. Please, USF, bring in scary football sage John Gruden to his former stomping grounds. Please, please, please. And what I do know, if USF hires John Gruden will flame out spectacularly. If there is a football God, USF falls under the spell of John Gruden. They can't help themselves, and they make him the head coach. That would be a great thing for Florida Atlantic. Just know that would be a great thing for FAU and the American if John Gruden is hired at South Florida.
I don't know Rob Higgins. I've seen his tweets, which I don't know what I am starting to think about athletic. I've recently started to notice over the last couple of years athletic directors becoming more vocal on social media. I don't know if that's for better or for worse. That can like a week ago, Mr. Higgins was saying that that Golish was practically going to stay, and now he's gone. I don't know. I prefer the Brian White approach of nothing other than WIP tweet, winning in paradise. But from the perspective of hiring a new football coach, this is going to be interesting to watch because this is an athletic director coming from the pro circles. And so you mentioned John Gruden.
Please hire Gruden.
You
Please
mentioned
hire Gruden.
I don't know what they're going to turn over some stones here. And from a pro perspective, we just saw Stanford hire the Washington Commanders quarterback coach. Do we see somebody from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers coaching tree? Liam Cohen's already gone. He's not coming back to college, but is there a analyst there that they try to do? And I don't know if that works either. It's going to be very interesting to see. I think the American Conference from a whole next year is going to look a lot different. I think we could see one of the, Temple, Tulsa, FAU, one of these teams who had, bad mid first years under a head coach, but showed signs of, hey, there's something there. I think we could see one of these teams, whether it's FAU, Tulsa, Temple, any of these lower teams, make a jump next year because some of the top teams don't have as much juice as they did this year with a new head coach. We'll see.
That is so goalish to Auburn. I just want to make sure I have this right. Goalish to Auburn. I did not see Silverfield, Arkansas. I don't know about that hire. That is, no offense, but that hire is very Arkansas. We'll just put it that way. That is, whoo, boy. I get the sense Razorback fans aren't going to be happy about that. So goalish to Auburn, which I think is interesting. He'll definitely come in and he'll do his normal condescending thing, his petty shots at Alabama, and that's what Auburn wants. I think he's great for that. That's why he's great in the SEC, but also good riddance to Alex. By the way, for the record, the worst beatdown put on USF in the Alex Golesh era came courtesy of Florida Atlantic 2023. There we go. Just for posterity's sake, just know FAU fans that that is something that you're able to enjoy.
What in the world is gonna? I'm going to have to keep an eye on Rock Bell and Tony. That is an interesting crossover about to occur. Rock Bell and Tony is the outside linebacker / edge coach at the University of Auburn. In typical Rock fashion, he is beloved up there. If you put Rock on your football team, he's going to invite the entire city of Auburn into his household to make him a nice dinner. That is the type of person that Rock is. Is Alex Golesh going to see the value in that and retain him? I hope so. I mean, that would show me, he's making necessary adjustments to win in the SEC. Because, I feel like the current version of Alex Golesh would overhaul a staff, bring in his guys. But that's a coach you got to keep. I don't know. But that's just that's my FAU opine there on Rock Bell and Tony. But I just
Byron Brown.
Interesting.
Byron Brown, you are the next newest resident of Auburn, Alabama.
This is going to be very, very, very interesting. I'm thankful FAU is not part of this coaching search. This is going to be a nuts offseason.
So Summerall's definitely going to Florida now, right? Like that's the final American piece to fall. Is Summerall is going to
see. Florida. Apparently, the last thing I saw, and I don't know if this has changed in the hour, 8 minutes, and 17 seconds of counting we've been on this podcast. But the last thing I saw is Summerall was debating between staying at Tulane and had other offers. There's no world to me. As I went on that whole spiel a couple minutes ago. There is no world to me where you could stay at Tulane right now. If you had, an SEC offer on the table, if that's what you want to do. I mean, I don't know. I say this, but some coaches want to build. They want to do that. Is that what John Summerall is going to do? I don't know, but I don't really see it.
No.
I don't see it.
He's not staying in Tulane. I'm sorry. He's not staying at Tulane. This is the year you got to go because there's never going to be a more big money coaching cycle than this. I don't even know what the hell we were talking about before. We were talking about FAU's turnover margin of -21.
We were getting into the turnover margin, and we got hit with breaking news, Ken. This is like you're on ESPN radio. It's like we had to jump into it real quick. But going back to the Owls, I think I do think that turnover differential is something that'll be addressed this offseason. But I don't know how
it has to.
I don't know. Obviously, you can address it from the offensive side. and you got to have, less turnovers. I think Caden, with a healthy shoulder, we should see that. And with a run game that doesn't force him to throw for 70 times a game, 60 times a game, whatever he's throwing, it's up there. That to me, more breaking news, but I think if they can keep him healthy, give him a run game, that'll help on the offensive side of the turnovers. On the defensive side of the ball, I think it all starts with pressure on the quarterback. We talk about keeping Caden Veltkamp, Josh Roberts. That's my defensive piece, where if you can keep him, and you're really starting to cook, because that's an edge rusher where I'm starting to look at as a guy who's giving me Trey Hendrickson vibes a little bit. I'm not saying he's going to the NFL. I'm not saying any of that yet, but he had a really successful year. Getting more pass rushers, getting pressure on the quarterback could cause fumbles, and it also speeds up the quarterback to lead to interceptions. So it'll all start there. I don't think our DBs aren't playmakers. I think they are. I do think some of that was just unluckiness this year in terms of the lack of it. But if they can get pressure more at a higher rate next season, I do think that it'll lead to more turnovers.
FAU is going to finish bottom 5 in the nation in scoring defense. That is, defensively, while there were spells this year, Robbie, where we said, hey, this is admirable from the FAU defense, ultimately, every major statistical measure is going to lay out that FAU's defense was a primary, if not the primary reason that FAU finished the year at 4-8. The turnover margin, and the prodigious amount of points put up on Florida Atlantic, which certainly ballooned in the last couple of weeks. Those are going to be the three you really look at, and you say to yourself, that has got to be tweaked. That has to be improved. But again, a bottom 5 scoring defense in the country. The thing is, FAU's warts, they're all out there. There's nothing subtle about them. You don't have to do a deep dive. It is very easy for the coaching staff to see where the deficiencies were, because they're not only prominent, they're close to bottom of the nation or bottom of the nation prominent for all to see. I think that's a good thing, that there's no secret. There's no secrets that are going to sneak up on anybody. Turnovers, lack of gaining them, losing them at a historic rate, and a defense that finishes near the basement in scoring D. That'll do it. 4-8 for sure. Jake also adds Summerall to Florida. Yeah, so there you go. There's the missing piece of this coaching cycle of the American coaching departures. Morris to Oklahoma State, Golish to Auburn, Silverfield to Arkansas, Summerall to Florida. So a year after 6 coaches were fired in the American, new eras started. 4 coaches, the top 4 coaches in the standings outside of Navy, are all leaving their posts to go to a power conference job, and 3 of them in the SEC. And you're going to have an American Conference title game, by the way, with 2, I guess, lame duck, you can call them. Is that accurate? Lame duck coaches in Summerall, who's headed to Florida, Tulane, and Eric Morris, who's going to Oklahoma State, North Texas. One point on this, and I don't want to spend a ton of time on this. I just need to get this off my chest. So many prominent college football talking heads want to step to the podium and preach about how the Group of 5 doesn't deserve a spot in the college football playoff. How they're just going to go to an SEC school and get blasted. Why would they participate? Why would they be given a slot in the college football playoff? Yet those same people are dead damn silent when every single year those same Group of 5 teams that you believe don't belong in the college football playoff have their rosters absolutely obliterated by power conference teams and their coaches poached by power conference teams. It's just the ultimate in hypocrisy. Oh, not good enough to play in the college football playoff, but certainly good enough to repopulate our rosters and turn them into impact players. And hey, coach, why don't you come and run the entire thing as well? I hate the power conference, the power conference cult. It drives me absolutely out of my mind. It's completely disrespectful, and it's why I believe the Group of Five should have its own playoff, because I'm tired of the double standard hypocrisy from the powers that be and all the sycophants that take to TV or to radio or to online to heap praise upon the power conference teams.
I do think this definitely asserts legitimacy to the American Conference. I mean, 3 of the top coaches going to the SEC. I don't see, the Mountain West / Pac-12 getting that type of attention. I don't think poaching coaches should be that barometer. That's the ugly side of college football. I don't think we should be highlighting it, but nevertheless, another point there to the AC. But I think it'll be interesting, as we said, next year to see who asserts themselves atop the American Conference, because Tulane, USF, they still have the NIL backing, but they will not have the continuity at coaching. So you can have all the NIL in the world. I watched Bryce Underwood throw for 35 yards against Ohio State yesterday, and I think he made the most money in college football. So,
yep.
NIL only does so much. You got to have the coaching to match it, and we'll see what hires they make. It's a big offseason ahead for FAU. I think that's the point here. We do need to fit, or at least talk about here on FAU, is what's the offseason going to look like.
My bold prediction is there's at least going to be a call from one of these American Conference teams to Jim Moore to see if they can get him out of his contract with Colorado State. That's my big, bold prediction with this. I don't understand Jim Moore going to Colorado State. It is bizarre to me, and he could have been a front runner for USF or Tulane. Don't tell me he didn't know, read the tea leaves of what was going to happen with this conference. Anyways, Jake, Caden Veltkamp needs a big body outside. Do you think Card or Hoke plays a bigger role next year with Wilson leaving, or will we try to grab a bigger body through the portal? I think Brandon Hoke. I don't know about Jade Card. I think they like him. He played a bunch yesterday. I think Brandon Hoke is going to be a significant piece of this wide receiver room next year. I think that all signs point to, everything is aligned to Brandon Hoke being a major contributor, health notwithstanding, for Caden Veltkamp in this FAU offense. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of questions about this receiver room. I'll repeat the same thing that I repeated last week, Robbie. There is optimism. There is optimism that the core, that the majority of this receiver room can be retained going into next year. Easton Messer was mum about it. He is prolific at coach speak, by the way. Easton Messer does not give anything away. That guy is well-trained. I am really impressed by him. Not only his football acumen on the field, but off the field as well. I don't know who exactly this means. Whether it's Platt, whether it's Wasim, whether it is Messer, whether it's Henry. But there is encouragement that the framework of this receiver room, this is what has been conveyed to me, the bulk of that receiver room will be with the program in 2026. Again, I don't know the individuals that means. Trust me, if Easton Messer was locked up by Caden Veltkamp, Zach Kitley would be screaming it from the rooftops. But there is optimism. We'll put it that way. There's optimism. That's all I know about that, though.
Yeah, Easton after the game, he said he hasn't really talked that much with Kitley about next season. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. We'll see. I do think having some young guys in that room will help if somebody does leave. You mentioned something with Assad. I heard about that. I didn't see that as well up until
something happened on the sideline at the end of the game.
I heard about it. Something with him leaving early and going to the locker room. I don't know.
Yeah, he had to be. He was. And again, I don't want to misrepresent this, but he was certainly upset about something. One of his teammates picked him up and brought him back to the sideline. I was told that a helmet was taken off and whipped down the tunnel. So I don't know. I don't know the particulars of it. I definitely saw Asad Wasim picked up and taken back to the sideline. This was late in the game. This was after I think Asad Wasim was probably told his day was done. I would suspect, and I'm just speculating here, he didn't want his day to be done. And I appreciate that it was a blowout. I appreciate that level of care and want to continue fighting for your football team. So I don't know, but I definitely saw the aftermath of it, and I would hope that cooler heads prevail, because I think Asad Wasim, him returning for FAU next year, would exponentially increase the chances of FAU's offense succeeding and Florida Atlantic maximizing what it is on offense. I love to see Zero back. He's so good. He is so dynamic, and I think he has the best hands on this team.
Yeah, like I was going to say, up until this week, I mean, last week, both he and Caden it's talking about him made it seem like he was, I wouldn't say for sure coming back, but there were serious talks about it. They talked, Asad talked about the premise of building towards next season, and Caden talked about, word for word, said he's exactly the type of player you need when you're trying to build a foundation. So, like you said, hopefully things work out. There was no talk about that. I didn't hear about it until after the press conference. My guess is it happened, in the minutes of doom in the elevator down to the field. I try to time it during a timeout usually, but it can only move so fast. There's 2 elevators for all 6 floors in the final couple minutes of that game when you're trying to get down there. So always find a way to miss something important there in those final couple seconds or couple minutes. And I guess I missed that one. But I did hear about it, and we'll see if there's anything that develops of it. I think by this point last season, we already had, I believe, CJ Hurd had already entered the transfer portal. So we're already ahead of schedule in that department. But I do think, we just got to keep an eye out on social media. Something will happen eventually, whether that's a reaffirmment to FAU or a thank you, and I'm exploring other options post. Make sure you have your post notifications on.
Yeah, this is gonna happen pretty quickly, I would suspect, who goes into the portal and who we know is staying. And a reminder, just because a player is in the portal doesn't mean that he's gone.
Please don't SHIT on people leaving.
Yeah, please don't do that.
I understand the frustration. Trust me, I do. But like Ken mentioned, there is always a chance they come back, and I'm not here saying you should, praise them either. If you don't have, but I live by the mantra that I was taught in kindergarten way back when at Advent Lutheran Middle School in Boca Raton. Shout out them. But if you don't have anything kind to say, don't say anything at all. That's my mantra with players entering into the transfer portal. It can be easy to say something negative, but they may always decide to come back. You gotta see what interest there is in you out there. Ken, but this question from Carlos was, I'm glad, it's brought up.
Let me read it real quick here for those who are going to listen after the fact on the podcast. And again, subscribe to the Florida Atlantic Voice podcast, wherever you get your podcast. It's right there for you. This day after edition, you're watching it live. If you missed part of it, it's going to come out in its audio form. And if you're listening to it in its audio form and missed the live part that we're doing now, welcome. That was a little bit of a little inception-y. Right there. Carlos, how committed is Brian White and the FAU brass to giving Zach Kitley what he needs to go get some guys that'll help turn this team around? You threw out an NIL question in the post-game press conference yesterday. One thing before I sort of defer to you on this, Robbie, is Caden Veltkamp is signed, sealed, and delivered. Top 3 passer in college football coming into 2026, locked in as FAU starting quarterback. That's a little bit of an indication, I would think, of the commitment level money-wise from Brian White and the athletics department. Now, how did that whole thing go down, though, in the post-game presser? What struck you most, Robbie?
Well, yeah, that was the last question. And I feel like it's a question I've seen asked to a lot of coaches around the American Conference. Most recently to Tim Albin of Charlotte, who they don't have the NIL investment they need over there. That's evident. If you've seen any, glimpse of Charlotte football, they need help, but point being, it's a common question that coaches around the conference has been asked. So I wanted Kitley's opinion on it, especially seeing, they didn't win any of the games against top teams in the conference, but they were close. They were close at times, but, they didn't win them. But they did beat the bottom teams for the most part. So I wanted to ask, do you feel like you have enough? I don't want to talk too much about last year, but we heard a lot more talk about NIL last year than we did this season. But Kitley, he said, it's going to be, and then he paused. I'll tell you this, it's going to be different next year for sure. He feels good with where he's at. I feel great about the guys they already have signed to come back next year. And then he said the biggest piece of the puzzle is the fact they have Caden coming back. He mentioned that they're good. We're going to be able to attack this year, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And so to me, that seems like they have the investment, whether that's from the school itself or an outside donor to what they need in the offseason. If they didn't have enough, I don't, as much as, Kitley wants to please Brian White, who attends all the home post-game press conferences, if they didn't have enough, I'm sure he would respectfully say, we need more help, or whatever he would want to say.
Yeah, and listen, if he said that, I don't think that it's unbecoming of him. I don't think it would get him into any sort of hot water. I do think he would say, hey, we're looking for more resources here, need to boost this up a little bit. What I'll say about Zach Kitley is that he's not flustered by this NIL thing. I think sometimes with Tom Herman, there was almost an obsession with it. It was all-consuming. Don't forget the last time he was coaching in college football, NIL wasn't really a thing, and then he comes back into college football. He's looking to compete right away. He's got this history of success, and NIL just drowned him. There was such a focus on it. Zach Kitley's been raised in this. He is not flustered or caught off guard by any of this NIL conversation, which is part of the reason he started NIL talks, started negotiating with players all the way back in like week 4 of the season, because he wasn't going to leave it till the end of the year because, again, he's been forged by this entire thing. It's what he knows. So if Zach Kitley thought that things weren't at least at a spot where he could make an impact with NIL, I think he would probably not outright blast anybody, but he would subtly say it.
100%. And so I do think they are making the right investments in NIL. I think it could always be better. Somebody asked me, do I think is that true? Do I think NIL could be better? Absolutely. I do think NIL could be better.
Every school would say that, though. But I think that in this conference, there's such a wide gulf between NIL at USF or NIL at Memphis, thanks FedEx, NIL at Tulane, the teams that have been in the conference for quite some time. They all have the upper hand in NIL money or funding for players. And listen, it's not like Brian White hasn't been open about the fact that, hey, we know where our standing is, and we are trying to make sure that it is always competitive within the American. He's never said that we are right there, we're with the big money spenders, but he has kept it competitive based on FAU's resources, and you can't argue with that. I mean, you signed a 6-figure quarterback in Cam Fancher a year ago. You sign and re-sign Caden Veltkamp, who was the Conference USA Offensive Player of the Year last year, and now the number 3 passer in the country, and he's coming back for a year too. So that right there is evidence that Florida Atlantic has done the legwork to at least retain the biggest, most important pieces, or bring in the most important piece to a football team, which is the quarterback.
Yep. And I think the interesting thing to see here is how they plan to continually improve that NIL, because I think you can't get complacent, right? I mean, because donor apathy is a real thing, and finding new ways to get money is an important thing in today's business. And I think Brian White is is a forward-thinking athletic director and is constantly doing that. USF just took a loan out to get that $22.5 million rev share. I don't advise FAU anywhere to take a loan out. Loans are never a good thing. And unfortunately, we don't have FedEx to drop a big donation into our lap like that. And Tulane has been around for a very, very long time, and it has created very, very rich donors who provide players for them. That's just simple. I will say when I was at Maryland, for example, Adam Hassner was up there having dinner with FAU donors. He is doing the legwork to as president to bring more money in here. And I'm sure Brian White works with him to make sure some of that money sees its way to the athletic department. I think there's a healthy relationship. Thankfully, the government this isn't the LSU. Hopefully it's not toxic over here. I think everyone works well for the most part. And I'm excited to see what they do to try to drum that up in football and get them some new pieces here this offseason.
Trying to think if we missed anything big here. I guess in summation, Caden Veltkamp is back, and that is damn near a miracle in this era of college football that the third best passer in the country, passing yards. I want to make sure that I'm very specific about that so I don't get railed upon on Twitter again. But the number 3 passing quarterback in terms of yardage in college football is coming back to Florida Atlantic. That is pen to paper. That is terms agreed to. That is an exceptional thing for Florida Atlantic, and one ray of sunshine coming off of what was a lackluster and it was a discouraging 42-3 loss to East Carolina yesterday in the season finale. FAU's warts in 2025 all out there for eyeballs to see coast to coast because they are prominent. They are close to, if not nation's worst, and that is the turnovers, 29 of them in 2025, lowest mark in all of college football. Turnover margin, worst in college football. Scoring defense, bottom 5 in college football. That right there, those 3, and yeah, there are a myriad of other issues to address, but those 3, those are rough. Those are really, really, those are things that I'm sure Zach Kittley looks at, though, and he says, hey, we can turn that around. That is absolutely fixable. Again, I just want to, I have screwed up over the last several weeks by not asking Zach Kittley what his main reasoning would be for the red zone offense to be as poor as it's been this year. Florida Atlantic's going to end the year 126th in red zone conversion rate, just over 70%, with a sub 50% touchdown rate when they score in the red zone. That is, that's down from even last season with a red zone offense that I said was the biggest factor in FAU's losing season. This is after Zach Kittley at Texas Tech last year had a top 20 red zone offense. So that's my fault. And I will address that with Zach Kittley at some point, maybe even on this podcast, to make sure that everybody has full clarity with that. And Zach Kittley will absolutely answer it and will be honest with it, because that's just what he does, and we certainly appreciate that. So I think those are the main components here. FAU is going to be facing some new coaches next year, with John Summerall going to Florida, Eric Morris going to Oklahoma State, Alex Golish going to Auburn, Ryan Silverfield heading to Arkansas. I still can't really truly believe that.
The only winner there is Memphis. They wanted him fired after the loss to Navy.
That's a weird hire. That is such a profoundly bizarre hire. By the way, our friend Lane Kiffin, and I'm not ripping him because I love Lane and I still talk to him semi-regularly when he answers my texts. But he is making it about as toxic as possible at Ole Miss. He's going to LSU. He has pushed back a team meeting because he is unhappy that Ole Miss will not let him coach in the college football playoff. He, according to reports, multiple reports, threatened Ole Miss with poaching the entire roster, taking him with him to LSU if he's not allowed to coach in the college football playoff. And there's another report from a local newspaper that he has told his offensive coaches, you decide today if you're coming with me to LSU or you don't have a spot on my staff. So, and the leadership council, the players for Ole Miss, have marched to Lane Kiffin's office to confront him this morning. So other than that, things peachy there in Oxford. It's incredible. Lane's departure from FAU was pretty clean. and cut and dry. I could have done without Keith Carter, Ole Miss AD, sitting in Lane's office at the stadium after FAU won the conference championship. I thought that was rubbing it in a little bit that he was poaching Lane Kiffin, but I digressed. But yeah, this is messy. This is very messy.
The worst thing I saw this weekend, Ken, was North Texas media relations credentialing multiple Oklahoma State reporters to cover the season finale against
that sucks.
Against Rice. I'm sure these folks have jobs to do, but I
hate that.
They're not covering the game, right? What good does it do, for your athletic department to give them access to that? I don't know. I've seen credentials denied for worse reasons than having no game coverage. You simply send one of those emails that say, hello, we only credential outlets that provide consistent coverage of our team. And that's all you have to say. But the poor North Texas fans had to read a column on their players saying, I haven't talked with Coach Morris about going to Oklahoma State.
Credit to Eric Morris, though. He came out. He flat out said, I'm going to Oklahoma State. I want to put it out there. I want to make sure that you're not finding out through media. He has owned it. He has addressed it. I think that's been easier on his team. Alex Golish has been nothing but wishy-washy over the last month about his future. I thought he handled it very poorly. He handled it very similar to Willie Fritz, who went to Houston from Tulane. Tulane fans are very unhappy now with Willie Fritz, and I think Alex Golish is going to leave a little bit of a tarnished legacy there at USF because of the way the last month has played out, where he's clearly at least his agent in contact with other programs while his team falls out of American Conference championship contention. All right, let's wrap this up. This has been a marathon for everybody involved, and we really appreciate you hanging in. Again, record numbers watching here live on YouTube and on Twitter. This will be in its audio form wherever you get your podcast, the Florida Atlantic Voice podcast. This was something before the season started. I posed to Robbie like, hey, you want to break down games afterwards? I'd love to have a raw reaction right after a game, but I can't do it because of travel for road games, a post-game show on the Florida Atlantic Sports Network. Why don't we do a day after edition? And Robbie said, yeah, sure, I'm game. Let's do it. And we did one after every single contest this year, for the exception of a couple of weeks ago where I had basketball right after. And you guys have kept coming in, kept hitting up the chat, and have really made this a staple of the FAU football season. So I appreciate not only Robbie, but I appreciate all of you for watching and for listening and for contributing and for being a part of it. And we're definitely going to bring back the day after portion of this podcast next year for the 2026 season. Robbie, thank you for helping out. Appreciate it. You were the stalwart. You were the cornerstone of this entire thing. So I appreciate you. And you gave perspective where I'm too ranty and too sports talk radio-y. You actually bring intelligence to these proceedings. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
I don't know about that, but I try to give some good, information where I can provide it. And yeah, we'll be back. The offseason will be churning. We'll keep you posted. So stay here, folks. Keep hope. It wasn't a pretty end of the year. There's definitely stuff to be fixed in the football world. And I look forward to documenting how they plan to do it.
I suspect we're going to have a lot of clarity on the portal here, maybe even by the time, if you're listening to this on the podcast, by the time you fire that up and start listening, these things, these dominoes are going to fall very quickly. So we'll continue to get back here on the pod. I'm sure we'll have a couple of emergency editions here over the next week and a half or so. Want to thank all of you for watching or podcast form listening. Want to thank Robbie Lastella, New Era Preps. I am Ken LaVicka, and we are presented by Robes Law Group, ROBES, robeslawgroup.com. Personal injury lawyers based out of Delray, in the community for you. Personal injury lawyers, yeah, there's a lot of them in South Florida. This one is the top one, taking care of you, making life easy for you in some of what are probably your lowest moments post-accident, whether it's slip and fall, whether it is automobile, whether it is motorcycle or anything of the sort. Robes Law Group, ROBES, robeslawgroup.com. Until we meet again from the football side of things, this has been the Florida Atlantic Voice presented by Robes Law Group.